Before we start today's episode, I want to extend an invitation that might just be calling you this February. Build Her Legacy Mastermind is an 8-week restructuring of your life, your money, your identity, and ultimately your future. Most women are trying to build the life they want on top of shaky foundations, unclear of what they truly desire, and unsure how to make money work for them in a way that creates real freedom. As we move into 2026, this is a call to rise and to lead differently, to stop building alone and start co-creating with God. Inside this mastermind, we are going to rebuild with Him at the center so you walk away financially empowered, anchored in your God-given identity, and equipped with the blueprint to build a wealthy life and a legacy worth passing on. We begin February 11th. And if this is landing for you, there is space for you inside Build Her Legacy. DM me on Instagram, the word legacy, or click the link in the show notes to apply. This isn't just another podcast. We're crushing the taboos and we're rewriting the rules. It's the space where we normalize women becoming wealthy. If you're done playing small and ready to become the CEO of your life and the architect of your future, then my girl, you're in the right room. Welcome to your wealthy era. Welcome to the Wellthy CEO podcast. Today's conversation is for the woman who's done everything right, the strategy, the structure, the discipline, yet still feels like she's pushing instead of receiving. My guest, Michael Edwards, works at the intersection of energy, identity, and leadership. He teaches a path he calls the third way, where masculine clarity and feminine intuition stop competing and start collaborating. This is about allowing the magic to happen and letting life respond. Tune in. I am so excited today to welcome Michael to the Wellthy CEO podcast. You are the first guest of 2026, which is pretty incredible. So I'm happy to have you here.
So excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
And, it's funny because I think this is the third time we've rescheduled our time to connect and speak. And when I was thinking about who you are and the message that you have for the world, I was like, this is actually perfectly fitting that you would actually be the first guest to come on the show at the beginning of a new year. It's a new chapter. So, and you and I couldn't have planned that, we were trying to get on an interview podcast when you were in Costa Rica and I was in Costa Rica, and then that just didn't work out. But, the universe knows best. And so here you are.
Here I am.
So, Michael, I'm so excited to dive in. I was actually just telling him before we hit record today that I feel like some of this conversation today is going to let you kind of be in on a coffee chat or in a living room with just Michael and I, where I have some stuff that I want to dive in that's like raw and vulnerable around my own personal story. But I know you're going to bring so much value to people. And so before we get into the good stuff, I would love for you to just share a little bit of who Michael is and your journey as to how you arrived to where you are today.
Oh, man. That's a big question. So my name is Michael Edwards, and I would call myself a spiritual mentor, to pretty high performing, high achieving people. I work with a lot of people who have created amazing success and amazing results in their life. And I help them really master their own internal operating system, realign with their own authentic blueprint, because each of us has this truly authentic, unique blueprint that's as unique as our fingerprint within us. And when we live from that place, our life opens up in ways that it's difficult to imagine. And most of us feel like it can't be that easy. And so we bring in all this complexity and all this complication that gets in the way of that truth. And then finally, once you've done kind of all that work, you are in a much different vibrational field than the majority of the population, which means you get to play life by different rules. And so at that layer, we start to play with the mechanics of reality creation. We play with the universal laws. We play with the synchronicities, the downloads, being in this deep relationship with spirit, God, the universe, whatever path you want to take, whatever word you want to use, but being more in the receiving mode of information and something that's greater than you, as being one of the main, if not the main thing that is guiding your life.
Mm, my goodness, that's so good. Oh, and how did you get it? Like, where is the personal,
Oh my goodness.
because like most people, right, don't just wake up and they're like, this is going to be my life work. Usually there's a moment, there's something that happens where something happens to you, or you just feel called because of something that you've witnessed.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because my own journey kind of mirrors the densities of consciousness. So if you look at there's a amazing map called it's literally called the map of consciousness, and it's these levels of vibration, and it's broken down into all these different levels. But there's three main bandwidths. There's the fear paradigm or the survival energy, and there's the mental paradigm, which is it's positive, but it's limited by the mind. And then there's the spiritual or authenticity paradigm, which is like the highest vibration, love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. And so I feel like I kind of went through all these stages of my journey, which I'll tell you. So when I was super young, I was very just tuned in. Like I would see things that weren't there. I would pick things up from people. I would, talk to my mom and I'd be like, oh, something about my uncle and like da da da, and she'd be like, "What are you talking about?" And then the phone would ring, and it would be my uncle. Like I was just so tuned in,
Yeah.
and I was really criticized a lot and shamed. I was gay, and I grew up in a northern small town, and so there was a lot of shutting down of my authenticity, of who I really was, and a part of that was turning away from my gifts. And for most of my 20s, I was a choreographer. I did it at an international level. So I choreographed dances for like big international dance competitions and for TV and yeah, it was a pretty amazing career. And as I got closer to my 30s, I just knew that that chapter of my life was coming to an end. And I broke up with my fiance at the time, and I kind of started to quit all the dance jobs and say like I'm really done with this. And I kind of ended up in a bit of a depression, to be honest. I ended up living at my mom's house and I was quite down. And I found this woman named Marissa Peer on YouTube. And if you don't know, Marissa's an amazing celebrity hypnotherapist. And I'd been into personal development for a long time, but I started listening to everything that she said and applying it. And my life just started to get radically better. And so I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then I found out that she trained hypnotherapists. And I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and learn from Marissa and I'm going to be a hypnotherapist. And like everyone thought I was crazy. My family thought I was nuts. They were like, "What are you talking about?" But I did it, and I went and I loved it so much, and I was so good at it. And she always said this thing that one day someone's going to come along that's going to be better than me. And I was like, every time she said that, I was like in my head, I was like, it's going to be me. It's going to be me. It's going to be me. And I thought that that would take years. But when I went to the, final training and I did the training in person, you go and you sort of meet her and they have all these examinations you have to do. And they saw how talented I was. And we kind of built a relationship. And she invited me to come and teach a master class for the school. And she introduced me and she said, I've always known that one day someone would come along that would be better than me. And I see that person in Michael. And it just like blew up in psychology world. I ended up getting all of these PhD clients and interviewed like really in psychology kind of therapy world. And so I did that for a time and I was working with trauma and PTSD and all of this kind of like what you would go to therapy for.
Right.
And I loved it so much. And I learned so much about the mind and the nervous system and, rewiring thought patterns and identity and trauma. But I started to kind of hit this ceiling. And, I would see these people that would come to kind of fix what was wrong. And then they'd kind of go away. And I would have this feeling of like, but what about everything else? What about everything else? And the more I worked on this, particularly the hypnosis, because you really sit with someone, right? You really sit with someone and kind of tune into their energy, like you're watching for all these subtle expressions. And so I was starting to really pick things up from people. And at first I was like, oh, it's just mirror neurons. It's just, whatever. But then it got really specific. Like I would feel this icy feeling in my chest. And then the person a few seconds later would be like, I'm feeling this cold feeling in my chest. Or I'd get, these images of things. Like I'd say, I'm seeing this, like grandma in a rocking chair by this red brick fire. And they're like, oh my God, yeah, that's one of the places my mind was going, but I wasn't going to share it. And I would be like, okay, let's go there. And I started to realize like this is real. And I thought that I was going crazy at one point in time. I felt all the judgments, that I imagined like, well, you're a therapist and you're like, this is serious. You can't talk about all this spiritual woo-woo stuff, even though behind the scenes that had become a major part of my life. And I eventually just surrendered to that. And I started traveling the world and learning from different mentors and shamans and visiting sacred sites and kind of opening more to my gifts in the spiritual side. And I feel like that was kind of the final piece that came together of this architecture, if you will, of all the different things that I do with the working with the mind and the different layers of the consciousness and our emotions and alchemizing what's in our nervous system. And then really aligning to this highest spiritual truth of who we are. And I don't really believe in like all the things that I was taught to do were modalities where like you work on someone, but I believe more in teaching people to be their own master. Like I believe in self mastery. And so yeah, it's kind of come together where this is what I do and this is who I am. And it's the integration of all these pieces that I've learned along the way.
I love it. It's such a fascinating journey. And just hearing how you have, I'm going to say almost like you've taken your gift of intuition and really leaning in and learning how to trust your intuition and then mastering it with this skill with hypnotherapy. And it's birthed something beautiful for you. And so I love the journey, it's amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Um, so Michael, I want to dive in a little bit with you. Like we're at the beginning of the year and I think, still so many people have this where to, they're trying to call in abundance. They're trying to call in overflow and they do all of the affirmations. They have the vision boards set, but what is not being aligned with what they're putting out there is what's happening internally, feeling whether it's worthiness of an issue or like not enoughness, if you will.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on, moving from not enoughness to an overflowing worth where it's not just the mind. And you brought this up and I was actually happy that you touched on the nervous system because I think this is a huge piece that most people really overlook, that oftentimes it's a recalibration that needs to happen, a reframing, a rewiring, dismantling of patterns. And so you actually talk about not enoughness as something that does live in the nervous system and not just the mind.
Oh yeah.
In your experience, where do you most often see this showing up in, high performing leaders? Yes, but also in, just your average entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting intersection between like what we want to manifest in vision board and the not enoughness, and they kind of go together. So I think let's look at it like that because I think it's interesting.
Yep.
Um, so a lot of the times we kind of approach this backwards, right? There's the like, let me vision board, let me manifest, let me set these goals and go about creating it. And we kind of think about it like we're adding something or we're starting to do something that we haven't been doing. But the universal laws, or I like to call them the universal mechanics, they're always in play. They don't turn on when you make a vision board and they're off the rest of the time. It's just always on. And so, really, your reality is just a feedback mechanism. It's just a printout of what's been going on internally inside you. And where it comes to the not enoughness is we look at, okay, I want to hit this next financial target, or I want to find love, or I want to change my body or change my life in this way. And the assumption is that we need to add something, or that we need to do something, right? But that's the not enoughness, because a lot of people want to believe, this very universal spiritual law, which people have probably heard, that, abundance is your birthright, or the real wealth is in who you are. And it's like, we believe that. But then when we want to go about creating something, we're like, okay, how do I manipulate reality so you can get that thing? And so a lot of the work starts with the willingness to let go of this idea that you need to somehow better yourself or do better in order to have something. And it's such a slippery thing, because the mind like rises to meet that. And you're like, well, that's great in theory, but like, what about the practical? Like, what about this? What about that? And this is the point. Our mind is wired. This is one of the fundamental things you learn about the subconscious when you learn how to do hypnotherapy, is the mind goes back to what's familiar. And so without realizing it, we're fighting for the old belief system. We're fighting for what actually gave us the result that we have. And this is the thing, is like, this is why people don't change, particularly in the lower densities of consciousness, because we just keep going back to what we know. We keep going back to it. And so even though you have the idea, I want to create this thing and I want to be different this year, if you don't change the operating system that's running that, meaning the nervous system, the emotional reality, the energy, your energy field, and the way you're relating to life and yourself, then you will just recreate the same thing. And we see this. Money is one of my favorite things, because it's just such a measurable thing to work with. It's so measurable. And so you'll see a lot of the times, as an example, where someone does this. Let's say they have a baseline, let's say they're making, I don't know, they're doing like $1 million a year. And they go, okay, I want to like 5x this or 10x this, whatever. And they go about doing all these things that they think they need to do in order to make that happen, and will make huge strides. Maybe they make 2.5 million or 4 million or whatever. But then very often what we see in circumstances like that is that suddenly now the business has bloated and there's all these unexpected expenses, or they get this crazy tax bill, or something happens and it like actually takes them back to $1 million a year, or whatever number. It could be 100,000, could be 10 million, doesn't matter. And so this is where you really get into the mechanics of reality creation, because it doesn't matter what you manipulate and that you put the blocks around, you will come back to whatever that energetic set point is. Like, that will be the thing that you come back to. So it's like, if you take the effort off, let's go with this. Let's say you're doing $1 million a year and you do all this energetic work, you do all this outer work, like 10xing the marketing, whatever, to get to more. The second you take the action, the pressure off that, you're going to go back to the same amount that you were doing. Whereas if it's an internal shift, it's just, that's the baseline you're going to keep going back to. That's the baseline that you're going to keep going back to. And it's so easy to say this, like, what if you were enough? What if you just trusted? But actually living it and making every decision in alignment with that truth in your life is much, much, much more difficult.
I fully agree. And I think everybody listening, no matter if you're making 6 figures or 7 figures, can relate on a certain level, right? Because even to get from 6 figures to multi 6 figures to hitting 7 figures, you have to push past this threshold exactly around like what you're talking about. So, it's very relatable to, I think, most people. And what's coming up for me is, like, you're talking about, like, okay, you got to break down some of these reality operational mechanics. Like, let's get into the nitty gritty of that, because this year we're in the year of the horse, which in some ways is offering a clean slate for a lot of people and having the ability to have acceleration take place. So even when with your example of if you're wanting to make 100,000 this year, or you already make that and you want to 5x it or 10x it, this is actually a really good year where energy is going to be able to collaborate with you in order to make that happen. So I think this conversation is so important to dive into the mechanics so that you can actually break through that ceiling and not come back to this baseline and be in this same cycle over and over again. So let's dive into that a bit. And then these internal shifts that are paramount that need to take place in order to create a new identity, essentially, is what you're doing. So that you don't fall back into the baseline.
Yeah. I just want to tweak that language a little bit, just because this is like something we do. And this is how I learned to do it originally, was like, yeah, create the new identity, step into the new identity. But I look at it more now as you have your highest self, which you could think of that as like almost like the intersection with the you that you are and spirit. It's like this highest energy, this highest self-expression of you. And then you have your human. And so in terms of the identity part, it's kind of like you've got to bring your human into alignment with your highest self. And so that basically, so that the container that you are can hold the bandwidth of that highest self, of that consciousness that wants to stream through you. And this is where, like, rather than mentally creating the identity, it becomes more about expanding your capacity to hold like who and what you actually are. And this is, I think, a piece that gets missed a lot of the times when people are kind of entering this work, and you see it. It's almost like, I call it like spiritual schizophrenia. Like you see it sometimes where people, they're like really spiritual and they're doing all this work and they're talking about love and light, but then they have this version of themselves that's super reactive and like gets really upset and stressed out, and what's happening, yeah, and triggered, and like isn't actually great at dealing with reality. And what's happening there is they're tuning in to that highest self, that source spirit, God consciousness, but they're not actually bringing their human into alignment to be able to hold that. And this is the thing. It's like, we're not trying to escape from reality to go up into spirit. We're trying to open the vessel that we are to hold more of that truth and to hold more of that light. And I don't know if you can feel this, but even as I tune into that, there's like an energy that's starting to come through, And so, and this is part of it when I talk about those three bandwidths and those three paradigms, is all the miracles and the cooperative reality that we want to live in exists in that highest spirit paradigm, that spiritual paradigm, that authenticity paradigm, the frequencies of love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. And they exist beyond the mind. And so we can deconstruct, but at some point there is also a piece where you have to be willing to open to something and experience something and hold something that exists beyond the mind. And so where a lot of people get tripped up in this approach to what you're talking about for like the new year and the way I'm going to create is we're open to the idea of that spiritual truth moving through us. But then the only tools that we have are mental tools. So we collapse it into the mind and we go, okay, but now how am I going to do this? And hopefully you won't mind me sharing this, but I know before we hit record, you shared with me that you normally have your 2026 all planned out. And this year you're kind of like, we haven't done that and we're just going to take life as it comes. That is actually one of the best places that you can be and that you can be living from to allow this truth to move through you, because we need to have space in order to listen. We need to have space in order to hear our intuition, in order to like receive the messages from the universe. I always say to my clients, do you have marching orders from source? And if you don't, like, why are you moving? And there's this thing, right? In the club, well, you got to be busy. I got to be productive. I got to post every day. I got to like whatever. And I always have this resistance when people come to me, especially who have built businesses doing, the very 3D things. And I really push them about the space thing, creating space, time space, energetic space, mental space, emotional space. And they're always like, but how, Michael? Like, I'm doing this in my business. This is the result. Like, if I drop any of the balls, like it's just I just don't see how. And I would say, I don't know how it's going to work for you, but I just know that it works. And they resist me and they resist me and they resist me. And then they finally surrender and they start doing things like blocking out 2 hours in the morning, for themselves, for meditation, for connecting with spirit. They start prioritizing being in nature. They start doing, my nervous system and energetic tools for regulation. And like without fail, usually happens in about 3 months when they finally really start committing to this, they'll come to me and say, I have no idea how this is happening, but somehow I'm working less than I've ever worked. I'm getting way more done and my business is thriving.
Right.
And it's kind of paradoxical for the mind because you're like, how could you work less and get, like, it just doesn't make any sense. But this is where it's the laws of vibration, not the laws of the 3D world. And so that whole scale that I was talking about of consciousness with the three paradigms, you've got fear, survival, the mental paradigm, and then the spiritual paradigm. The lower you are is what's called force, which means reality is literally denser. It means everything's heavy. It's resistant. You're living in a not cooperative reality. So you literally have to push the blocks around in the 3D in order to make things happen. But as you raise your vibration, you live in what's called power. And you could just simply say is a cooperative universe where things are lining up, where synchronicities are coming through, where a lot of the clients that work with me in my inner circle will like worry about, oh, but if I'm not doing this thing, how am I going to get that result? And you just have to listen. You have to listen. You have to listen. And then it'll suddenly be like, I just landed this $200,000 contract, or like this thing came in, or this person came in, or I just met this person randomly on the plane, and now we're in love, and he's in Italy and I'm in Florida, but we're having this love affair, and it like doesn't make any sense, but it feels amazing. And you're like, yes, that's it. That's it. And the thing is, when you hear this, and I hope the people that are listening really hear this too, is like you've experienced that at some point in your life. We've all experienced, and maybe it's a time that we fell in love, or it was summer, or just life was really good, and we were just on, and things were just happening, things were just lining up. It was just like opportunity. It was just in flow, right? And for a lot of us, we've accessed that state as an unconscious competent. So we didn't know what it was that we were doing that was making that happen. And so because we're taught to look at the 3D first, we go into the mind, we'll go, okay, well, during that time, I was like pushing myself to work out and I was like doing this 3 times a day. And so we go back to the actions first,
Right.
rather than the state of being. It is the state of being that unlocks that reality. And that state of being is unlocked through peace, presence, space, and listening. We have this fear, and you might feel it coming up, or the listeners might feel it coming up, that if we live that way, that we're just not going to get anything done. We're like, well, that's great, Michael, but I'm going to go meditate on a lily pad and my business is going to fall apart. But the thing is, if you truly give yourself that space to open up and connect, you are going to get a download that is going to be like a lightning bolt that will shoot through your being. It'll be an idea, an inspiration, or something, and you will not be able to stop yourself from moving on that thing. It's like electricity that lights up your whole life, and everyone can feel it. If you're writing copy, if you're interacting with people, even if you aren't public facing and you're just interacting with your team, it's like electricity that charges the entire system. And that's actually the thing that makes the magic and brings in the external results that we want to experience.
If this episode is bringing you value, can I please ask you for 30 seconds of your time to subscribe to the show from wherever you're tuning in from? Leave a review and share this episode. This is how we amplify the message, we grow the show, and we multiply the impact for women. So everything that you have said, I mean, not only does it resonate, like deeply, I feel it like in my core. And for those of you guys listening, Michael and I are just meeting for the first time in this conversation. So, Michael, I'm going to share this with you about me because you don't know this about me, but I am extremely A-type, and I have had to do so much intentional work. And this has been over years. Like, I mean, there was a time where it was like surrendering was like, I am surrendering. And if you're watching, I have my fist closed and I'm like, this is surrender. And it's like, it's taken a long time to be soft and open-handed and really trusting that, what, like when you're talking everything about like your highest self and then the human in you. And just even this last year alone, I'll share with you that I have done like energetic work for a very long time. And, muscle testing to find like these inner child wounds that I had and go back and heal them. And this year it was, there's always work that needs to be done, right? Like we're never done. It's like the endless onion of layers. And so much like when you're talking about our higher self is having to understand who we actually became when we were younger because of the circumstance that we're in that as actually not who we are, that the false self, right?
Yeah.
And realizing that some of these character traits that emerge in the becoming of who you were not intended to be can serve you and create success.
Yes.
But because oftentimes they're birthed out of trauma or stress or scarcity or lack, that's where it's going to keep you. So when you talk about that baseline, like you might hit 2.5 million, but come back to that million. Oftentimes it's around these characteristics that hold you there because they're actually not created in abundance, in overflow. And so even for me, like, and this is why I said, like, I was excited to come and talk to you today because I am in a season right now where I have 2 more sessions with my coach that we're specifically identifying triggers that go to my inner child, triggers that go to my false self, so that I can be the highest version of myself that I'm intended to be. And even when you're like, there's some people that you see them like this, and then all of a sudden it's like, you're triggered on this or you're triggered on that. And I can fully relate. Like I'm looking at myself right now, and I've done so much work, like I said, over the years, but the goal is to continue to evolve. And I'm at that stage where I'm like, I want to be in that higher place for myself. And so
Yeah.
it's called me to giving me the invitation and the opportunity to go, where does that little Shae still need to heal? And who did she have to become that's not actually her? And it's
Yeah.
time to set her free in order to be able to become the fullness that I'm intended to be. And the other thing that really came up for me when you were talking is and this is the A type, right? For me, a lot of people that it's the doing, it's the doing, it's the doing. And I actually just shared on Instagram on one of my posts that so much of this year and in setting up your year is not about doing more. It's about what do you need to actually stop doing to create space. And I love that you said that because if you're wanting more, you have to make room. And you
Yeah.
can't make room if you keep adding more on top,
Yeah.
right?
Vacuum law of prosperity. Yeah.
Right? So much, not always, but oftentimes we need to unlearn, unbecome, stop doing to create space and then sitting in that stillness. So like you said, you can hear, you can listen
Yeah.
what you're supposed to receive. So I just wanted to share in you talking that this is all that was like coming up for me
I
on the
I
other
love
side.
I love it so much. If you're open to it a little bit, can I ask you some questions and we can like work with your human a little bit around some what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay, so you said all this work that you're doing so you can become your highest self.
Mhm.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What's in the way of being your highest self right now?
Nothing.
Right.
Truthfully. Yeah, nothing. Like, she's our and it's funny that I said that because I
Yeah.
will say to other people, you are already her.
Right.
Just need to allow her to come out.
Right.
So, it's funny that I said that, but that's the conscious side, like
Totally.
or the subconscious side, I should say, because
Yeah.
consciously I know, but subconsciously this is the issue.
Yeah. But like, even if you're sick,
Yes, even if I'm sick.
And even if you're not moving forward?
Yep. Yep. Even if I'm not moving forward. Let me tell you, this last year of stepping into motherhood has taught me that the plateau does not mean I'm going backwards, and that what's meant for me won't pass me by as I'm watching other people build and do and achieve and move forward. And what feels like staying still feels for me like I'm going backwards. Like that's
Yeah.
A-type in me. That's like my
Totally.
when you talk about that. But when I sit in it and I really think about my life over the last year, and while I was going through it, I had a ping pong match always going on with this. And so whenever I'd have these like thoughts, I would have to get really still and I'd look at my daughter who's 4 months old, 6 months old, and I'm like, I choose her and I choose this, and I've chosen to be present
Mm.
because I will never get this time back. And so as everyone is going by me and doing the things and building the stuff, I'm exactly where I need to be. And I'm actually becoming her, like in the stillness, in the sitting, in the becoming of a mom, as I've stepped into this role in motherhood. And so this year was a really interesting teacher for me in so many ways. And I turned 40 when I had my daughter. And so when I look back, and I do this every year, I have a continuous like journal log of reflections from in my 20s. And, I have my future self, my 10-year, my 5-year, where I thought it was going to be building. Okay. At 40 was a completely different year for me because I had to choose if I want to keep building or I want to be present and I want to witness my daughter in the precious moments of her first year of life. Um, and so, and that's where my year, as much as it was a becoming, and I said this in one of my posts, it was actually an unbecoming for
Mm.
around business, entrepreneurship, the movement, the drive. And I'm still figuring out how that actually is all going to evolve for me because it is going to look different. I have no desire to go back to the 39-year-old self of me because now I have this little human and she's way more important than any deal, any client, any.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. First of all, I love this so much. I mean, what a beautiful, I feel like, motherhood or just being responsible for another human is such a great teacher like that. And kids are such great teachers too, because they're so present and they're so alive and they're so in the moment. And when I was in my 20s and I was a choreographer and a dance teacher, I loved working with little kids because they still have the spark, they haven't lost it yet. It's so beautiful. So I love that. But, you know, as I'm watching you talk, and even as you said, like you went from like the I'm becoming to like I am my highest self and talked about motherhood, your whole field and your whole energy just like softens. And that's it. It's like then so as we like start to tune into that, then it becomes about dissolving the separation between that and your business. So the old way is like this is this over here, but then I like when I go to business, I go back to the old toolkit. But it's like no. Like, and then you start to challenge in your mind like all the things that say like I have to do this. So like, what would it feel to be the mother or the matriarch of your business? Like, what does that energy feel like? And I see you smile as you say it. And it's just like the more you get to play with that. And there's a lot of mental interrupting because we go again. One of the things of the mind is the mind goes back to what you know, right? So you find yourself going like, oh, I know that this marketing strategy or this networking thing or this way of doing things, this hustle gets the result. And so we tend to reach for that old tool, but that's where a lot of the work comes in and like, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt? And can I listen? Yeah. And I just love so much about what you're saying, the fact that of course, we're having this conversation now. But when you're talking about the space as well and your experience, how motherhood taught you presence and taught you to create space. And the thing is, when you see really high level people, that's a lot of the times how they're operating. Like my really, like my professional athlete clients, my public figure clients, all the ones that are not just materially wealthy, but I would say prosperous, where they have the material wealth and they're just living a life where you're like, I want this life.
Yeah.
They all live with presence and spaciousness and not the rush. And if there is, some of them have seasons, especially the athletes have seasons where it's like, this is the season where we go, but then they have the off season where there's this space to kind of be and to live.
Well, one of the things that I learned in my 20s, I don't know if you know, I'm in real estate. That's what I like grew up in, and that's a whole other conversation for another day because I am making everything is shifting. Everything is shifting right now. And so even I should actually, before I tell you the story, when you had said, like, what does it look like to go back to your business? The word that comes up for me is softer. Like,
Mm,
I have lived for a very long time, and what a lot of women in business strive for is stepping into their masculine.
yeah.
As opposite. I have had to do so much work to allow my feminine to not just like come in, but like bloom and flourish. And it's still a lot of work for me. I'll be really honest. And so when I think of, and this is part of what motherhood is going to gift me, it's not even just about teaching me, is going to afford me the ability to stay soft and allow for creation to happen in a much more feminine way, in a much more receiving way, like that's for me, a lot of, what I'm looking forward to,
Yeah.
pulling more of that into this year. Um, but you talk about spaciousness, and again, I want to come back to it because one of the most powerful words that I started to learn in my late 20s was the power of the word no.
Mm,
And really saying no to things that not just didn't serve me, like with my clients, but saying no to my calendar where I did block off like that time. So
yeah.
prior to my daughter coming, I won't take appointments before 10 a.m. Like, you won't be able to get me on a meeting because I'm doing my prayers, meditation, I'm working out, I'm getting my house ready for me before I show up for the rest of the world. And it is a really important practice. And you brought this up earlier, is like, the clients that start to do these time blocking and actually create a space, they actually start to thrive in all different areas of their life, like more than they realized. And so, yeah, it's such a powerful tool, really,
Yeah.
really important. And I think business a lot, and I'm sure you would agree with this, is like, we've, for the last couple of years, the kitschy phrase is like, no, burnout is no longer cool, and it's not a badge of honor. But just how we are deciding to show up and do business differently, and then the clients as well that we like take on, right? And choosing.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what? Look, this is actually a good segue because you talk about the third way, right?
Yes.
This is your thing.
Yeah.
Just hit me. I'm like, actually, like, this is actually a really good segue of like integrating power without burnout around
Yeah.
the third way. So maybe let's go there. Let's talk about like the future of leadership is this integration doesn't have to be polarity. And then I just brought up the masculine, and I think many women have overdeveloped their masculine in order to succeed.
Yeah.
Others, you feel disconnected, exhausted, numb, burnt out. And so let's talk about the third way and how do you reestablish balance without losing that momentum in your business?
Yeah. So, okay, I love this so much. So the third way is this language that I came up with to describe what a lot of us go through, which is you've spoken to so much of today, which is the very masculine, the very hustle, the very like push myself to show up and like discipline to succeed, 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 and then burnout. And this inevitably happens, right? Because most of us are pushing ourselves really hard against our blueprint of how we're actually meant to operate as a being. And then this is when people tend to find the more spiritual world, or at least some kind of healing, whether it's yoga, breath work, or living off the grid, whatever. And we don't have a lot of examples of holding those two energies, the yin and the yang, or you could say the masculine and the feminine together. We have a lot of examples of extreme of both. And so it's like people tend to go from this extreme like hustle push burnout to this like eat pray love moment where they have the only way that they can be at peace is to kind of escape from the world. And you'll see, and I'm such a stickler with my clients on this, because we want to find all the beauty and all the spiritual wealth that comes from that, but we also don't want to settle. And I think that that's what I see a lot of people do, is they go, well, success equals burnout, money equals bad, and so peace and spirituality and like this like almost escapism from the world equals good. And that's if I have to pick one, I'm gonna pick this because I hated that. But that's also not the full expression of who we are. And the full expression of who we are and what actually makes us happy is to become who we really are. In more 3D terms, you could say to self-actualize, or it's really aligning that human with that container, because your desires are yours for a reason. The standard of life you want to live is yours for a reason. Like we were talking about before, living internationally and being in all these different places and chasing the sun and living in places where the weather is like really what nurtures your soul. All that's part of your desire. And part of that comes from mastery of the material plane, and that means success. And so while many people do have a cocoon phase, I call it like the hermit on the mountain phase, we've got to kind of go and retreat from the world and like find this peace. Our ultimate goal is to get out of this pendulum swing between hustle and surrender and into the third way, which I would say is not so much a balance of those energies, but a harmonization of the both. And if you think about the actual yin and yang symbol, it's like the two little almost like comma shapes that are going around each other. People just see that and they're like the yin and the yang, but there's actually a lot more to that symbol. So there's the yin and the yang. There's the yang within the yin and the yin within the yang. There's the line that divides them, the container that holds them, and the eternal dance that they're in. And so there's a lot to this, but one of the most fundamental things that I'll say is that they're constantly in motion. So they're always moving and flowing. And you mentioned flow earlier. And so the biggest mistake or trap that I see a lot of people make with this is we try to approach this from a fixed standpoint. So we go, I'm going to have balance. And usually we'll hit a point of balance at some point along the way. It'll be like, okay, there's this 3-week period where you did your like 2 hours in the morning and you worked this much and you were in surrender this much and you had this much and you were like, that worked and that was magic. That's the magic formula. And so you try to replicate it going forward, but that's no longer in flow. That's no longer, it's kind of like water coming out of a hose. It's like, it's always new water. It's like a different balance of hot and cold. It's a different balance of yin and yang. And so, yes, structures can support us, but ultimately, the second you're trying to recreate something from the past or recreate something from an idea, you're back in the mind and you're back in overcompensation of yang, of the masculine. And so the yin part is the harmonization, is really being able to be in flow with both those energies as they're actually presenting. So within an hour, within a day, within a week, within a month. And I love what you said earlier about saying no. And I want to add to this, it's like giving ourselves permission to choose based on resonance rather than logic is a huge, huge part of this, So, I mean, there's obviously so much to the third way, but I'm so passionate about this because when people start to really master these two energies, not as separate things that we swing between, but as like together, that's when we really become empowered to create what we want to create in terms of success in our businesses and in life, but also live in this way that feels so peaceful and fulfilling and in flow.
Mm, I love that. So, okay, like you said, you brought up the word harmonized in your explanation. And so give us like what does a tangible example when like what does it look like when the masculine and the feminine energy are actually harmonized, whether it's in decision making, maybe it's in boundaries, money, leadership in your leadership in your business.
Yeah. So you could, okay, so let's just go with we'll paint a picture.
Yeah.
Let's say you have your time in the morning and you're meditating, not for the sake of getting guidance, because when we start to do that, we tend to go into more transactional energy and it messes up things, because who you've chosen to be is the person that's connected to spirit. And let's say in that morning, you get connected to something. You get this idea for your business. Maybe it's an event, maybe it's a launch, maybe it's a newsletter, whatever. And you can literally viscerally feel this thing in your body. Like you've got it, you're connected, you feel the energy, you move, right? So you finish your morning and you start your workday, air quotes workday, and you move and you work on creating that thing. And there's that thing inside your body, there's that thing inside your body, there's that thing inside your body, and it's moving you. And what you can do as a practical tool is set a timer. You can set a timer that goes off every hour. And every time the timer goes off, you can ask, am I still connected to that essence? Or have I dropped that? And am I in something else? And you'll feel it. It's a visceral experience of I'm being moved, I'm being moved, I'm being moved. And then often that like dwindles, or we start to get physically fatigued or mentally fatigued. And then the mind comes over and goes, okay, well, you're working now. So you just need to follow up with this, or you just need to do these emails, or just push yourself to do another hour or whatever. And the second you're disconnected from that thing, the yin is gone and you're kind of in the masculine, in the yang. And so some practical work there is to then interrupt that and to go, I'm not just going to do for the sake of doing, because remember, it's that vibrational state, it's who you're being. I recently had this experience where I saw this Chinese medicine guy, because my health always dips a little bit in the winter here, and he actually really helped me. But one of the big things he focuses on is yin and yang, which is masculine, feminine, or hot and cold. And he said this thing to me because he was really about, it's so cold here in Canada and it's cold and it's damp, and right. So it's all cold, it's all yin. And so he's like, you've got to eat like physically warm food and warming foods like ginger and chai and all these things. And he's, taking things away from me. Like I can't have lemons, can't have avocados, I can't have freaking celery in my soup. And I was like, but celery is my favorite flavor in the soup. I can't, it's got like yams and terms and all these things that are warm. I was like, I can't just put, 2 stalks of celery. He's like, but this is what you have to understand is the yin is more powerful than the yang. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, oh my God, it's the same in energetics. The yin is more powerful than the yang. The feminine is more powerful than the masculine. That vibration, that fuel, that magic that you're connected to is more powerful than the doing. And we've all seen, if we really reflect, we've all seen moments in our life where we've done all this doing, maybe in a survival or fear energy, and it really hasn't amounted to much. And then there's been other stuff where we've been totally in the magic and we've maybe taken one action or like a very aligned action, and it's resulted in something incredible. And so this is where like the worthiness piece and all these little human things that say like, I've got to have this productive day, I've got to get all this stuff done to prove it's like, can we interrupt that? And can we go, when I'm no longer connected to the magic, I pause and I find space, I find the magic again. And the more you can teach yourself to do this, and this will happen in synergy with healing the not enoughness, because the more you don't feel worthy or unworthy based on what you're doing, the easier it will be to just find the magic again. But the more you can find the magic, not so that you can get back to work because that's transactional,
Sure.
but because being lit up by the magic of who you are is how you've chosen to live,
Mm-hmm.
the less time we spend out of harmony. And it becomes, at first it's very conscious where you're like, I literally get people to set timers and do all these exercises to like interrupt and get in this state. But it starts to become so normal and so your experience that the second you're out of that, you're like, oh, what is this? This is not how I live. This is not how I feel. Let me tune back in. Let me find that thing. And then we find that we become this conduit for our highest self, for the light of consciousness flowing through us as us in every now. That's what presence really is. And we live in the one unfolding moment. And there's nothing to make happen. There's nothing to force. There's nothing to do. Although in those moments, you will do things because you're so in harmony of the yin, the who you are, the receiving, and the yang, the how you're bringing it into your reality. And so it's more about a practiced way of being than about like any specific thing that you do or don't do.
Mm, that's so good. So good. Like, as you're saying it, I'm like, I just need to actually receive it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even want to respond. Like, it's just to receive that.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. And um, the magic is the magic.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really powerful reminder as we start this new year, that in everything that you desire for or that you want to have on your vision board is looking for the magic and how it aligns with who you are.
Yeah. And I would look at like this everything you're putting on your vision board, what if that's the truth and there's nothing you need to add, but it's simply about getting out of the way
Hmm.
to let that come in?
Michael, I feel like you and we could just keep going.
I know.
I'm like, oh, it's so good. I really think we should have like a part two.
Yeah.
Uh,
I want to I want to share one story. Is that okay? It's just coming through because I feel like it to ground some of what I've been saying. So I'll tell you, I had when I was quite far along on my journey, actually, I had done the hypnotherapy and done the energy work, been, in the coaching and transformation industry for a while. And I was, as you inevitably do, looking at like, okay, I want to grow my business. I want to be more known. I want to scale. I want to like bring in more amazing clients because I want to impact more people. And so it's doing all the things that you're supposed to do. I had, a team. I had this agency that I was working with. It was like really busy. I was like getting up in the morning and then showing up and doing all these things and making decisions. And there's all these like Trello boards and project management systems managing all the parts of my business. And I was getting this real like high off that, like this validation from the
sure.
busyness. And I was also asking for a deeper relationship with spirit. And for whatever reason, a lot of the things that I ask for come through people that I date. I don't know why. For some reason, that's like the path of least resistance for the universe to give me things. And I started dating this guy, and he was very spiritual, like very embodied, and not talking like pop spirituality. I'm talking like real, like he'd gone to India, lived in ashrams. He was in Indonesia as well. Like he'd had experiences of like the Buddha coming to him and like meditation, like really, like he was just like a little living Buddha. And it was fairly early days of us dating, and we were walking in the forest and we were telling each other about our lives. And I was telling him all about my business and all these things I was doing. And I was showing him like how like I do these things, and then this company like cuts it up and makes these reels and all these different pieces. And I was, so proud of that at that point. And he told me about how he was living with so much spaciousness. How we had like a bunch of money saved up, and then he had a low cost of living, and he had this kind of remote job, and he worked intentionally, but not very often. And his intention for the spring and summer was just to spend as much time in nature, as much time with friends, as much time with spirit as he could. And he was like, and I just love, the feeling of like not having anything I have to do every day. And I felt it like I got punched in the chest. I just had this like feeling of he's wealthy and I'm poor. And like, what the F am I doing? And I suddenly realized I know all the things. I know all the spiritual things. I know all the energetic things, but I'm still hooked into this like 3D matrix of hustle. Even though it's like wearing a really fancy suit, it's still the same thing. And I just went, I'm done with this. And I committed so deeply to my spiritual path, so deeply to peace. And at that point, I didn't think, I was so naive. I thought, that's going to be it. And all these success things that I wanted are never going to come now. But I was fine with it. I truly was surrendering that because I was just like, I actually value peace more than anything else. And I don't even know. It was like 6 months or 6 weeks after that. I fired the agency, I downsized my team, I stopped doing all the marketing things. 6 weeks after that, I had my highest month I'd ever had. And they just continued. And it was like, okay, now you've stopped being like tuned into the bullshit. Now you're actually ready to lead people. And I started just having these amazing, like, just dream clients that basically had been what I was trying to find all this time, just started finding me like through the field and through resonance. And at first I was like, well, they came from this and they came from that. But then, so they came from collaboration. So I was like, well, it's collaborations is the thing. But then all the collaborations ended and I was like, okay, well, no one else is going to come. But then they just kept coming. And it was like the more I lived from this truth, the more what was meant to come just came. And it's been so beautiful. And so I share this just as a piece of evidence because the logical doubting part of our mind loves evidence. And I encourage anyone that's listening, like collect evidence because a part of us goes, well, I can't do that because if I stop, my business will fall apart. Maybe you experienced that in the past, but we're not creating from the past. And you can borrow other people's evidence to become your own evidence. And I see this all the time in like whether they know about all the mechanics and the laws or not, when I study successful people, I see this all the time. I just was on someone else's podcast and she was telling me a similar thing about how she came to this point in her business and she was burnout and she just was like, I'm simplifying everything. And she thought her income was going to take this huge hit because, she's doing less. They're like doing less marketing channels, less offers, less things. And she was like, I'm fine with it because I just wanted my peace back. And then she was like, that was the year my business blew up. And so again, if you cannot be doing it from a transactional place, because that's manipulative, but just knowing that you giving yourself permission to live in peace and from this like authentic truth of who you are is the path to your highest prosperity.
So good. It's so good. I was like, I was gonna maybe say something, and I'm like, I think we should just actually leave it there. Michael, tell people how can they connect with you? How can they find you? And then I'll ask you actually one kind of maybe a continuum of this thought that you've just shared. But if there's anything else that you would want to leave the woman who's building wealth, impact, and creating legacy, what you would want her to hear from what you just said.
Yeah, it gets to be easy. And the way that you feel your experience of life matters. In fact, it doesn't just matter, it is the key to unlocking what you actually want. Yeah. So you can find me I have a podcast called Frequency. I'm on all the podcast platforms and YouTube. And then you can also find me on Instagram, although I don't use Instagram as much these days. And it's just Michael Edwards.
Michael, thank you so much for being here. the beginning of the year, I think you should come back on.
I'd love to.
Check in with like everybody. And I think the listeners will agree. I'd love to have you come back and we can, we're midway through 2026 and what's flowed, what's, been easy, what if it's been hard, why has it been hard? But yeah, I would love to have you back on, and I'm just so grateful for your time today. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, it's been such an honor and a privilege, and I so appreciate you, and thank you so much for having me.
If something in today's episode resonated with you or sparked a shift, tag me on IG or send me a DM. I genuinely love hearing what lands for you. And if it spoke to you, share it or leave a quick review. It helps more women find this show and step into their own wealthy era. Until next time, lead with purpose, live with intention, and stay wealthy.